Okay, so welcome back to the channel, and recently I asked people to ask me questions on Instagram because I was going to make a YouTube video, sort of like a Q&A format. So let's get straight into the questions. So the first question is, why do high-end labels use brass for jewelry? And I think the answer to this is very simple. I think it's just the fact that high-end brands now realize that a lot of people are buying their brands not because of the quality but because of the name. And so they know they can get away with selling really expensive jewelry that's made with very terrible materials. That's like literally the short answer. The next question is, can we become a journalist if we don't study journalism? If we can, how? Now, you can definitely become a journalist without studying journalism. I think writing is a skill that some people are naturally born with. Yes, you can improve your writing skills by doing it all the time and getting good feedback, which is what school provides. But if you have a framework in which you don't need to go to school, but you still have a good, amount of friends who are really good writers who can review your writing, or just, putting it in the public and people just publicly like review your writing and stuff, I think you can improve. And then in terms of actually getting jobs, most journalists, unless you work for a company like a newspaper or a fashion magazine, they work independently anyway, so they work freelance because it's normally editors that commission articles. What I will say though is that journalism is still quite a traditional industry, and I think it'll be really hard being a journalist for like a big institution like the New York Times or the Financial Times without studying journalism or some sort of writing related degree. But I think if you want to be a freelancer or you want to have your own platform and you want to be a journalist, I don't think it's necessary to go to school for it. But I would advise it because I study fashion journalism at school, and it's because I think having lecturers review your writing and really give you good feedback and help you improve your writing, lead you in the right direction, I think is invaluable experience. But of course it comes with a cost, so that's another thing to consider. The next question is, would you recommend using the Vogue Runway app to get into fashion? Now, I would definitely say yes, but like anything, it shouldn't be your only source of learning about fashion. So people who don't know what Vogue Runway is a platform. There's also an app, and it's essentially a platform that shows you all the runway looks, and it also gives you reviews to runway collections written by different people in Vogue. And because of course Vogue is a big institution, they have a lot of money, one of the big parts of the Condé Nast empire, they have some of the best writers that write on the Vogue Runway platform. The only issue is, in Vogue, you're never going to get a very overly critical review because Vogue has many different sponsors that they're writing about, so they can't write negative things, or they can't be too critical because they might lose sponsors. There might be, financial ramifications for saying certain things. But because Vogue, once again, is big, Vogue has access. And so most times for these articles in Vogue Runway, they've actually interviewed the designers themselves because they have that sort of access. And so you get good information, key information about the collections in Vogue Runway. So I think if you're first getting into fashion, I would say that Vogue Runway is really good. One, because you can see all the looks. Two, because sometimes you can even see like the runway videos. And then also you get really good information. So yeah, I would definitely recommend the Vogue Runway app to everyone interested in fashion, essentially. So this question is, why are some European designers, and it has in brackets Czech Republic and other East Europeans, why can't they make themselves blow up? So when you say make themselves blow up, I'm guessing that you mean in relation to like designers who are from the US, the UK, places like France, Italy, Spain, those sort of things. Now, the only difference between, let's say, the Czech Republic and somewhere like the UK is just the infrastructure. Because in the UK, we have the British Fashion Council, that's the BFC. And the BFC has a lot of connections, a lot of contacts, and it can help the emerging talent in London, get out there in the global audience because the BFC has a really good framework and it has really good infrastructure. We also have different things like Fashionista in the UK, which is an initiative for, young designers, and Fashionista will sort of help them with their collections and help them get to London Fashion Week and things like that. In America, they have the CFDA. In France, they have their councils. In Milan, Italy, they have their councils. So I think it's more to do with the infrastructure and how much government support is given to emerging designers, and I think that skews a lot depending on what country you're in. So I think maybe if you're in Eastern Europe, the framework isn't as high in terms of like the government really supporting the fashion industry and emerging designers, and which is why it can be a little bit more difficult to become a big designer, especially if you're based in parts of Europe that aren't considered, you know, fashion parts, like in Italy or France or Spain, Denmark, places like that. Now this question is, do you think it's better to pursue fashion as a career or passion from a progress point of view? Now that's a really good question. I think it just depends on how much you love fashion and if you actually plan to work in fashion, because I think just being interested in fashion and then working in it they're just so different. And so I think you have to really know if you want to put the work in to sort of make fashion your career, because nothing is easy. The same thing with fashion, but nothing in general in life that is good really comes that easily. And of course, making it in fashion is very difficult, but I personally don't think it's difficult because I think most people in fashion don't have a crazy work ethic. And so if you just had a good work ethic, that would already put you past like 80% of people that work in fashion. And so therefore you could move quite quickly within the industry. But I don't know, it's quite a nuanced question because it just comes down to like, how much are you into fashion? Would you actually want to work in fashion for the rest of your life or to have it as a career for many years? Because being interested in fashion and working in fashion, oh my God, those are two different ballparks. Now this question is, how can I acquire certain pieces as a teenager without tons of money? Now my advice, I know this is not a financial channel, this is a fashion channel. I don't like the idea that people have like grails. I don't understand it, because if you have a piece of clothing that you've wanted for years and years and years, it means probably you can't afford it. And I just don't understand the mentality of like dwelling on one specific clothing item, because I think really good stuff is constantly being released. Like every year, there are really, really good collections that I see and I'm like, oh my God, I would get like that and I would get that. And that's really cool. And so this idea of like dwelling on things, especially when you don't have a lot of money, I think it comes from this idea that people think you have to own certain brands to be involved in the conversation. Like, for example, I think you can like Rick Owens' work and you can know a lot about Rick Owens' work without having owned any of the pieces, because some people just can't afford it. It's just how it is. And so I think as a teenager that doesn't have tons of money, I think there are more important things in life than being so fixated on owning certain pieces. I mean, you might want to go to school, save money for school, or, you know, you could probably better spend your money investing in something rather than buying something that you're literally going to spend all your money on like one piece or a few pieces. I just wouldn't advise that, to be honest. We have another great question here, and it is fashion really about design, or is the narrative more important? Now, fashion is a very broad industry, and so I think it depends on what area of fashion you're fixated on, because there's a really commercial side of the industry where it's not about any narrative, it's just about pumping up clothes. Think Zara, think Shein, you know, things like that. And then if you're the type of brand that, you know, you want to show at Paris Fashion Week and things like that, I think the audience of people that, you know, follow Paris Fashion Week and go to Paris Fashion Week, they are into things like a brand having a story and a narrative. But generally, if you just think historically, fashion has changed in an insane amount. Before ready-to-wear was a thing, it was common practice that if people had issues with their clothing, they would just sew it back up themselves. And so fashion before, like 100 years ago and beyond, was like really sustainable because people were just reusing clothing, mending clothing. Everyone knew how to sew to an extent, and people just fixed their things, or everyone had like a neighbor who could help them sew. And so it's just very different to the culture of fashion we have now, where everything's a bit throwaway. And I think with that, there's less of an appreciation for design in general. And when I say design, I mean sort of, you know, seams being sewn correctly and being sewn well, or a garment being constructed properly. I think A lot of people don't even know what good construction on a garment looks like. Neither do they even care. And so to go back to the question, I think it really just depends on what type of brand you want to have and what market and target audience you kind of want for your brand. This next question is, why do courses for international students cost twice as much as courses for home students at Central St. Martin's? Now, in the UK, I'm not sure about other countries, but in the UK, the cost of going to university, or what Americans call college, is the same. It doesn't matter what school you go to. So if you go to Oxford, or you go to Cambridge, or you go to University of East London, or you go to University College London, or you go to University of Leeds, it's all the same price. And it's just set like that by the government. But then also the international fees are also a set price, and they're always more. That's just how it's always been. I don't actually know why international students have always paid more than the UK, but I know that's how the educational system goes in most countries. Like even in the US, for example, if you go to a college that is within the state that you live in and you're from, it costs less than if you go to a similar college that's out of state. And so I think it's like that amongst different countries. So that whole international fee thing, it's not just exclusive to like Central St. Martin's. That's just how the UK educational system is as a whole, essentially. Now this question is, what's your opinion on hypebeasts? Who do you think are the hypebeasts of today? Now I think the term hypebeast is just a term that describes someone that buys clothing for hype, as the name suggests. And so I think it doesn't really matter what brand you wear. I mean, there are people that wear Supreme because they really love it and they're skateboarders, or they just like the designs, or people that wear Stussy, and there's also people that wear Rick Owens because they really love it and they love the designs. I wouldn't call those people hypebeasts, but there are also people that buy things because it's hyped and they just want like approval from other people. So same thing with Supreme. Some people might buy Supreme because they want to flex their Supreme, or some people might buy Rick Owens because they know that it will give them ratings. It's the same thing as things like Tabby boots. A lot of people buy Tabby boots, not because they necessarily like it, but they're just like, okay, if I buy this, like people are going to see me as like a really stylish, high fashion person. That is my idea of what a hypebeast is. So it's not really about what brands you wear. It's more to do with your mentality and how you think about the clothing that you wear. And so that's how I would describe what a hypebeast is. Oh, we have a really good question here. So it's, how do you define good taste in fashion? That's an amazing question, by the way. Now, I don't think there is such a thing as good taste, which is hilarious because I know a lot of people disagree with me, like cancelled. Because I think good taste is something that is so nuanced, and it's, you know, like when I hear people say, oh, that person has like good taste or that person has bad taste, it makes me cringe because there are so many aspects of fashion. There's like streetwear, there's like the high-end fashion, more avant-garde stuff, there's like punk fashion, there's, you know, sportswear fashion. There's people that, you know, are really into like wearing leather jackets of like old Formula One. Like fashion is so broad. There's so many communities within fashion. And so I might just be really fixated and, you know, into this sort of Japanese Hiroshima chic aesthetic that was done by Yohji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo, and not understand these people that are really into like vintage racing jackets. And so I might think they have bad taste because they're wearing those racing jackets, but that just comes from me not being into that. And it also comes from me not understanding that aspect of fashion. And so therefore, I really don't think good taste exists. I think everyone just has a taste. And I think people have a different taste depending on what you're into. And I think that's fine. I think difference should be okay. This idea that there's like a sort of general understanding of what good taste is or bad taste is just not really something I subscribe to. It's not a way of thinking that I subscribe to. But yeah, that's an amazing question, by the way. I don't think someone has ever asked me that. That was a really good question. Now this question is, thoughts on the lack of objective criticism in fashion these days? Another amazing question. And now, to plug my ebook, I just launched an ebook on my website, and it's about effective ways to learn about fashion. I'll leave the link to that in the description below, and I'll also like comment it in the comment section. But why I'm bringing the ebook up is because I really answer this question in depth in the ebook. And it just comes down to how commercial fashion is. I mean, so many fashion publications are sponsored by fashion brands. So a good example, let me see if I'm going to get, because I've got my fashion magazines here. So this is Vogue Homme. I don't think this is a continuing magazine. I think it's discontinued. But anyway, the point is, for example, so this is a page in Vogue Homme. It's like the Dior Sauvage sort of advert, right? Advertising the perfume. So what that means is Dior, the perfume team of Dior, would have paid Vogue a certain amount of money to have, you know, the perfume advertised in the magazine. And so that means that Vogue has a vested interest in promoting Dior well. And so if there was a negative review by journalists in this magazine about Dior, Dior would be like, why are we paying you money to advertise our brand and you're speaking negatively about us? So then they would just pull their money back and collect their money back and be like, no, we're not going to advertise in a magazine that's speaking negatively about us or critiquing us in a way that people can see something negative, can take something negative for it. And so because so many fashion magazines, like all of them, Vogue, ID, Days, all of them are advertised by fashion brands, they can't really be critical. And so even when a collection is like, and once again, the idea of like a bad collection, quite nuanced, but just for the sake of the point I'm making, sometimes there are collections that there are issues with it, like glaring issues, and journalists have to tiptoe around saying it because they know that if they mention it, then there will be financial ramifications to what they say. And that's why objective criticism is so hard to find in fashion. It's why I'm a big proponent and supporter of fashion journalists that write for people like Robin Givhan, who writes at the Washington Post, or people like Vanessa Friedman, who writes for the New York Times, because the New York Times, the Washington Post, they rely less on, you know, advertising revenue from fashion companies. And so the lack of objective fashion journalism, it all just comes down to money. At the end of the day, it's really just the financial thing, unfortunately. And it's a big reason why I always say that people should support, you know, independent journalists. Like there are many people on YouTube, for example, that have independent voices. Even if the people on YouTube maybe have less fashion experience than like a journalist that has been a fashion journalist for loads of years, I really value their opinion because it comes from a genuine place that isn't, you know, affected by a financial outcome or some sort of financial goal. And that's why I trust, you know, a lot of voices that I listen to on YouTube more so than I would in a big publication that's tailored towards fashion. But yeah, another really amazing question. That was such a good question. So now the last question I'm going to answer is, why do you think fashion people gatekeep so much? It's something I've been thinking about. Now this is also something I mentioned in my ebook. But just to talk about it shortly, I just think that a lot of people in fashion are insecure. And by insecure, I think that a lot of people, because their personality is fashion, which is sad, like you should be a more well-balanced individual. Like there's more to life than just fashion. Because some people, their personality and their whole life revolves around fashion and nothing else, they have this like elitist mindset to the point where they want to feel above everyone and they want to feel like they know more than everyone else, and they always want to feel like they have this higher level of understanding in fashion than other people. And so what comes from that is when you ask these type of people, oh, what can you tell me about like what happened in the 1950s in fashion, all that stuff, they're going to be like really condescending, make you feel really stupid, and then not tell you the information anyway and tell you how they had to read 2 books to get the information, so you have to do the same thing too, type of thing. It's unfortunate and it's sad that that happens in fashion, and I do know that's what discourages a lot of people from, you know, wanting to really get into fashion. It's sad, but I would say just ignore those people. And most times the people that like to gatekeep information don't really know that much anyway. Like even when I'm in online communities, people just end up talking about the same brand all the time, which is why I'm like not really on social media anymore. I've like kind of gone away from being on active too much on social media because I'm just tired of talking about like Margiela, Rick Owens, Balenciaga, like the same brands over and over again. Like what about the brands that inspired, what about the designers that inspired all these designers like Paul Poiret and Madeleine Vianney and, you know, all these people like Sonia Rykiel and all these people? Or what about new emerging designers? You know, like graduate designers at fashion schools making really creative collections, or new emerging designers on fashion week schedules and things like that. There's just so much more to fashion than, you know, 5 brands or like different subcultures that are going on. What's going on in the world of vintage fashion? What's going on in the world of sportswear? And what is, you know, the innovation in technology that's going on in sportswear? I'm really into fashion in a very 360 way. And I've noticed that a lot of the gatekeepers and the people that really try to hold on to information and don't want anyone to learn anything, they most times, from my experience, they're the people that actually don't know that much in the grand scheme of things, which is quite hilarious because they act like fashion geniuses and stuff. And at the end of the day, it's impossible for anyone to know everything about fashion. It's just impossible. Fashion is too broad. The history is too vast for one human being to know everything there is to know about fashion. Impossible. If you know someone who knows everything there is to know about fashion, let me know, because I'd like to meet that person. But yeah, on that note, that was really fun answering these questions. I did get many more questions, so I will you know, answer those questions in a future video. If you have any questions you want me to answer maybe in a future video, comment that down below. Or if you have any thoughts about anything I've said in the video, let me know. And on that note, like I said, I launched my ebook. It's on effective ways to learn about fashion. I do think that if you know, want to learn about fashion, or you want to know what are good sources to learn about fashion, I think you should definitely check out the ebook on my website, because it's not too long. I made sure that it's like 5,000 words, so it's long, but not so long that you couldn't read it in like one sitting and get loads of information. And like, it's the type of resource that I think I would have loved to have when I was first learning about fashion and when I first got into fashion. So definitely check it out. But on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon. Thank you very much for watching.